with Australian cricket journalist Adam Collins, and he can join us now live from Perth. Adam, I think a lot of us have been dreading this part of the show, but just give us an insight into what the Aussie media are saying this morning. Typically understated, is it?
Yeah, that usually is the way after thrashing England. No, I mean, look, we've spoken the last couple of weeks about the fear if England didn't get a good start in Perth. Well, this is the worst nightmare. This was an utter catastrophe after lunch yesterday. And I think the worst thing from an England perspective is that it was vaguely predictable. When they got into a position to exert real pressure on Australia by absorbing their second and third spells from their fast bowlers, they just showed no willingness to do it. And that ultimately has proven to be just a dreadful collapse in the second innings. The middle order are fully culpable for it, driving on the up in Western Australia. Who even considers doing that, let alone trying until they were dismissed? And from there, it was a genius display from Travis Head, one of the great Ashes hundreds, 123 from 83. Only one other player in the Test match past 50, putting the degree of difficulty of all of that into some perspective. So 1-0 up in the Test match where England desperately needed to go 1-0 up themselves as we head to Brisbane 10 days from now for a pink ball Test match, where it's only going to get that much harder for England's batsmen who seldom play in these day-night Test matches.
Adam, we've always talked about when we've spoken to you, and you touched on it there, about the first ball, the first session, the first day, the first Test, and setting the tone for the rest of this series. Ben Stokes says he was shell-shocked. How can England actually recover from this?
Yeah, it's a fine question. I mean, Brendan McCullum, the coach, was asked about this last night, and he said, we're not going to move away from our blueprint. Now, I to an extent, anticipate comments like that from the England camp. They're reticent to ever acknowledge external noise as being worthy noise. However, internally, there has to be a degree of humility here. The way they collapsed yesterday, yeah, sure, there was some good bowling early on, but down the list, especially through that middle order, the collapse of 3 for none, Pope followed by Brook, followed by Root in the space of 2 overs. That was straight up attempting to do things which are incredibly hard to do in Australia on bouncier pitches. Trying to drive on the up can often be a death sentence for a batter. And yet they didn't ever at any stage, apart from the first morning at times, show any willingness to do anything other than that, which means that going to Brisbane, where it'll be almost exactly the same as far as the conditions are concerned, if not harder, will they be willing to have that moment of introspection? Will they be willing to have that moment where they consider that plan A may not be the right plan in these conditions? Will they be willing to accept that the outside noise, former greats of the England team, might know a thing or two about playing in Australia? That's going to be fascinating to me. There's a 2-day tour game scheduled for Canberra over next weekend. At the moment, Ben Stokes' team have decided not to play in that. As I understand, it's been widely briefed out. They're going to go to Queensland and hit some golf balls and have a bit of R&R. Of course, they'll play some cricket as well up there and train, I'm sure, but still, they've got a chance to do some old-fashioned tour game preparation against the Prime Minister's 11 in Canberra. That was always the plan for the England team. I'm fascinated to see whether they change tack on their original plan and actually go to the nation's capital and actually play in that fixture and give themselves a marginally better chance against the pink ball, when in all probability they'll be up against Pat Cummins next week as well, who should, all things being equal, be declared fit for that second Test match.
Adam, the papers today have been awash with this perceived lack of preparation, only one warm-up match for the first Test, and how they're going to prepare for this pink ball Test as well. It's been massively scrutinised. It seems to be a lack of preparation, maybe a lack of care, a bit of pig-headedness almost on England's side. How has it been reported in Australia? How are they reacting to how England have prepared, not only for that first Test, but what they're planning to do ahead of the second?
Oh, look, don't get me wrong. It's a pile-on in the media at this juncture. Of course it is, right? We all know how this works. However, look, there's the want to be carefree in this England team has actually served them pretty well, right? The type of prep they've done for this series is in keeping with the prep they've done with other series that have gone well, right? So it's not as though they are doing this without any evidence base. The challenge now is that their carefree want has looked like careless batting this week, and how they arrest that. Well, it's a matter for the England camp, but they had one warm-up game, as you say. That was at Lilac Hill last weekend on a flat, slow, low pitch up the road from here, actually. That wasn't remotely like the conditions they were going to get at Perth Stadium. So now they've got the chance before the Brisbane Test, the day-nighter, the pink ball, to have a crack. Or they can choose to leave it alone and go up to Queensland and hang out and have some R&R. It's their call, but if they were to go 2-0 down and not play that Canberra game, there will be quite rightly, a huge degree of scrutiny over that decision. So that's all ahead of them now. They've got 3 days off owing to the fact they've lost this test match inside 141 overs. That's like 5 sessions. It's the 7th shortest test match on record for games that have actually reached a result. They only batted collectively for 67.5 overs. They've lost 20 wickets in effectively 2 and a bit sessions of Test cricket. This is record-breaking on so many levels. If they can't, at this stage, just pause and have a little think about the way they went about it, they never will.
Hi, Adam. It's Jason Burt from the Daily Telegraph. Obviously, we're concentrating a lot on England, but from Australia's point of view, it couldn't have gone any better. They'll be stronger now for this, won't they? What do you think they will do going into the second test?
Yeah, the funny thing is it probably could have gone quite a bit better. Look, if you just look at the box scores, Australia were trailing by 40 runs on the first innings about 27 hours ago. It's remarkable how quickly it all played out. They were bowled out for 132. After England in the first innings with the ball, they were immaculate. They bowled to a plan. They realised what was working on this pitch, to get a little bit techie, but from 6 to 8 metres in length was really working. They saw that when Australia was bowling. They replicated it. They did it better at a higher pace, and they knocked Australia over virtually inside a session and a half, right? So their blueprint with the ball stood up. The issue was their bowlers didn't get enough of a break. They were back out there on their feet within a session and a half, with England bowled out inside, I think it was 34 overs the second time around. So there are challenges for Australia. Their opening batsman, Usman Khawaja, looks like he might be on his last legs as an international cricketer. Sure, Travis Head went up top in his place and had a worldly, but still there's the Khawaja question. There's how do they get the exact formulation of the top order which they want going forward. There are outstanding questions, but you're spot on in describing the confidence boost of yesterday. When Marnus Labuschagne left the field with 51 to his name, I interviewed him as he was crossing the boundary rope. I've never seen the guy smile more deeply and with bigger eyes. I mean, these guys now truly believe they got England on the rack, and rightly so. To be fair, they did go 2-0 up when they played England in 2023 before it all changed at Leeds, and they nearly threw that series away. But it has a different energy about it at the moment, especially knowing they're going to the Gabba next, which traditionally and historically possesses such an advantage for Australia.
Adam, it's Charlie Eccleshare here from The Athletic. We were talking before about the possibility of complacency and overconfidence for Australia. Do you think there's a risk of that, or do you think those past lessons, they might heed some of those past lessons?
Yeah, Charlie, I just doubt it. This means so much to Australian cricketers. It means a lot to England cricketers too, don't get me wrong, but Australian cricketers know that their careers are defined by the way they play against England. Whether it should or shouldn't be that way, that's a separate debate. But Ashes cricket in this country is an obsession. It is the national conversation. It's every street corner. And there's no way now they've got the chance to drill England that they'll in any way psychologically not give themselves every chance. The criticism of England since the McCullum and Stokes regime took over is that, especially in the last couple of years, they've not been ruthless enough. They've got themselves into winning positions in test matches and series and let it slip. Now, the reverse can be argued for Australia, where they've found themselves behind in series and found a way to scrap back, which to me meant that if Australia had have lost in Perth this week, they had the muscle memory to find a way through that. It's unclear, notwithstanding 2023 when England did come back manfully, it's unclear whether England are going to have the tools to do that. That's what makes next week fascinating. I come back to my original point. Will England be willing to show a little bit of candour, maybe not contrition, but just kind of like accept that there is external noise that's worthy of listening to? They described Michael Vaughan, the England great, as a has-been a couple of weeks ago. Well, he is a has-been who won the Ashes against Australia in 2005. He is a has-been who's one of their best batsmen of all time. These guys know a thing or two. I don't think that they should be stuck in this dogmatic way of thinking that the only ideas that are worth a pinch of salt are those which have emanated from the dressing room to begin with, because that just becomes too predictable. I hate to say it, but that was the original sin yesterday. Australia knew after lunch, with England in a terrific position, 1 wicket down in their second innings, 105 lead at that time. England could have played they could have played conservative cricket and driven Australia into the ground. But the Australian quicks, to be blunt, knew that England don't do that. They knew they'd keep attacking. They set their lines further outside the off stump, and they waited for them to nick to the cordon, and they duly did. So that's where England's, I would call it, ostentatious way of playing has actually become so predictable that teams can plan for it. It's very different to the way it was in 2022 when it was a bolt from the blue. It's not that anymore.
Yeah, just picking up on that point, Adam, because there was a time when the Australian team was described as arrogant, and that was what was levelled against them. Could that be said about the England team just now?
Well, look, whether it's arrogance or otherwise, I genuinely believe there's a view that's formed over a number of years that they've got this licked, that they found a style of play, which, remember, it did change England's fortunes dramatically. They won 11 games out of 13 or something like that after Stokes took over as captain. You go back to 2022, that was an exhilarating time to watch that team, but it was different. It was changing the way that, I mean, we hadn't seen cricket quite like it at the test level before. Other teams had scored quickly, but not in the way that England were doing it. Now, a couple of years on from that, teams can plan for it. They can prepare for it. I spoke to Brendan Doggett, the Australian debutant, on the morning of the match and put this to him. What will you do when England come after you? And he's like, that's all we've thought about. We've been thinking about it and planning for it from the outset. And that means that there's more sophistication about the way that it's been combated. I wonder whether now this is the right moment. We heard about, what was it, Bazball with brains, Bazball version 2.0. We saw a more refined version of it at Lord's this year. That was a mighty victory over India in a great series. They weren't far away from winning at the Oval and winning the series as well. But you look at the way they won at Lord's. It was playing more conservatively against the immense threat of Jasprit Bumrah, and they found a way to win that test match in the final hour of the final session. I mean, there's something to be said for that. There's more than one way of winning a game of cricket, and having the ability to absorb as well as apply pressure is test cricket at its best. When you're too one-dimensional, that's where you get found out. And to your question about whether they're overconfident in their approach, well, I mean, that is a reasonable accusation to level, I think, at this juncture.
Hi, Adam. It's Mark Ogden from ESPN here. You mentioned the fact that the next test at the Gabba, Australia's got a great record there. Are you guys talking about a 5-0 series win yet? Is that on the cards?
Well, look, I don't want to. I was joking the other week with Damesh on air that, the best case scenario for cricket fans, and I think a lot of cricket fans around the world, is that this series is competitive all the way to the end. We haven't had a series that was alive in Australia between these teams at the very end since 1982-83, right? So we are quite conditioned, I'm afraid to say, to England getting pumped here. They've lost their they haven't won a test in the last 14 that Australia have won in this country, and now they need to win 3 of the next 4 to regain the Ashes, which seems at this stage like an extraordinarily difficult task. So 5-0, I'll keep that in check. I'll play with my bat and pad very closely together, which maybe England should do a little bit of as well. But if they win at the Gabba, this will get enormous on them. If they lose it, if they can't win at the Gabba rather, if they're 2-0 down going to Adelaide, they will have the weight of the world on their shoulders. And that has typically been when England teams have had their hearts broken in this country, and then it gets very nasty very quickly. So now, naturally, what happens in Brisbane next week has so much importance. Can they find a way through? If they can't, they're stuffed.